All right. Hello and welcome to Coffee with Ryan. I don't know which one this is. It could be the third one. It could be the second. It's definitely not the first. And it won't be the last. There we go. What a good intro. As you can see behind me, I'm inside of a cereal coffee shop inside of Malaga, Spain, in España. And I've been traveling through Europe, meeting the team, seeing everybody. I was in Italy for a little bit as well, which was great. And I got to see right in Milan where there's a cathedral, and it was actually the city was designed by Leonardo da Vinci, and being surrounded by that history and seeing all that was like pretty incredible. So shout out to Vincenzo, who helped basically give us an idea for all the history and everything going on, and just walking around the city, seeing all that, and seeing the idea of for this cathedral that's in the center of Milan. It took 600 years to build, and they didn't finish it until 1965. So if you think about the generation that started doing the architecture for it, they didn't even get to see 10% of the build happening. And the fact that the and it's behind the cathedral, I mean, if you think about that, it's pretty incredible. Um, I think there was a little drop in my Wi-Fi. Can you guys still hear me? Tyler, Jonathan? If you can, just maybe a thumbs up in the background. Hey, Amir. Okay, all right, we're still good. So I'm using a hotspot. I'm inside of a coffee shop here in Spain, as I said, in Malaga, in the south. Okay, it froze for a moment. I wonder if there's a better Wi-Fi signal that I could use, but hey, we really had a hard time finding a place to set up, to be honest. Eduardo and I, we were walking through the city just trying to find something, and luckily, I think 5 minutes before this started, we were able to actually find a spot. So it's kind of interesting. We called a bunch of co-working spaces. We ended up actually, I mean, kind of doing penetration testing. Yeah, we're using the phone hotspot at the moment. So what ended up happening is we walked to this co-working space, and apparently it may not actually be a co-working space. It might have just been somebody's office. And so we walked up to the door, and somebody came out, and then I just reached for the door, and they just like let us walk in. And I guess we needed a badge to get inside of there. So if we would have had the laptops at that moment, we could have just set up, I guess, out of somebody's random office to do this. But the coffee shop is pretty great. It brings me back to like, the original. If anybody's ever seen the zero to paid professional course that we have at Serverless Guru, that was made back in 2020, 2019, 2020. It was pretty much entirely done outside of a traditional environment. And that's also where all the articles that I wrote, I was always in a coffee shop or something. So the fact that, I'm back here in a coffee shop in an unorthodox environment with spotty Wi-Fi and not perfect sound quality it feels like home. So so yeah, I mean the things that I wanted to talk about on this coffee with Ryan, or I just wanted to give like some ideas for some cool stuff that I've seen happen recently. One of those was something that I watched yesterday from Elon Musk. It was a SpaceX presentation, and if you guys haven't seen this, it is incredible. I wonder if like maybe I can share this screen. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, so this is the screen here. So as you can see, Elon Musk SpaceX presentation leaves audience speechless. And you always see that and you're like, okay, this is clickbait. Is this actually going to be something decent? But I'm telling you, if you watch this, you will be speechless because he talks about the future that we're heading towards. And he speaks about being on Mars in 20 years and having 1 million people on Mars and bringing the entire industry that we have on Earth to Mars as well to be able to sustain that. And even getting to a point they wanted to build, right now they're actually working on it, building a Starship factory. Let me see, I think the Wi-Fi is cutting again. Good. Okay. So the Starship factory, the goal is to get to 1 Starship built per day. And the idea is every 26 months they'll leave. Those cells will act as the initial foundation for setting up the civilization there. And just the amount of things that have to go into thinking at that scale, and the motivation that he has when he talks about it is, yeah, one per day. So imagine in 26 months, every 26 months they do a launch, but the launches are going to happen all around the world. And you can just imagine like really sci-fi stuff, Star Trek, whatever you want to say, Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, if that's relevant here as well. It's like thousands of big starships launching off the planet, all heading in this, like in a caravan, basically across the cosmos to Mars to land and bring people to. And he was saying, if you want to open a bar, you can open a bar on Mars. If you want to run a factory on Mars, you can run a factory on Mars. All of the industries that exist here will need to be replicated there, and we're going to need a lot of entrepreneurs and builders and creators to be able to make that work. But the motivation that he speaks about very early on in this video, which I encourage everybody to watch because it's very inspiring, especially with all the stuff that goes on day to day that we are bogged down with. And you hear somebody talking about trying to make civilization a 100 million year civilization or a 1 billion year civilization. It puts everything in perspective, right? And so the thing that he really touches on is the light of consciousness, and how the light of consciousness is so special and so rare that it may not be replicated across the universe. And if it is, it might have died out. Even if it died out after a 1 million year civilization, that's only 0.001 of the total timeline that we have for our universe, which is 13 billion years. So even a 1 million year civilization, if that light went out, it only was 0.001% of the total amount of time that's happened so far. And so the way that he put it is that consciousness, in his opinion, started with writing, and the earliest writings that we have are from 5,500 years ago. And so if we think about that, the consciousness is so special and it's so critical to our future everywhere across all countries and all people. And by being able to get to Mars, we end up creating that insulation layer. So if a World War III kicks off or something here, if we had a moon base only, they might try to nuke the moon base because it's just so close. But if they try to do that to Mars, that rocket's going to be traveling for so long, they'll be able to intercept it. And that's his belief, is that if we can get to Mars and we can bring all the industry there, and we have at least 1 million people that are living and on Mars, then the light of consciousness will never go out. And I think that that's just something that you can't walk away from hearing about all these new advancements that they're making, and sit there and go, wow, how is this person thinking about all these things? And on top of this, the crazy thing as well is that everything that he's done up to this point, it seems like it's been building towards this moment. And he's speaking to the SpaceX crowd that are all SpaceX employees, and he's telling them, this might be the single most important thing that any of us ever do. And it's happening right here off the Rio Grande on a sand spit, in the middle of nowhere, and it's the gateway to Mars, and the gateway to making humans interplanetary. And the advancements, literally the advancements that they made are just absolutely insane. Even the way they're going to catch the rocket is basically using this like mechanical arm. So it's going to start like falling down, and they're just going to grab it, which sounds so sci-fi. So anyways, I would encourage everybody to watch this. It was time well spent. It's 27 minutes, but you wish it was like 3 hours, to be honest. So that's a cool one. Also, I wanted to jump into a tweet. Very interesting conversations happening on the serverless space. Let me find the right button here. So I'll go to the original one, and then we can talk through mine as well. Mine is completely off topic. I know that I retweeted Austin Collins here. I apologize, Austin. I was not meaning to nothing that I say in here has any relation to anything that you said, actually. You sparked my feeling of wanting to speak on this topic. And so I'm grateful for that. So this was the original post here from Gregor. So does serverless really make developers' life simpler, or does it rather shift complexity from one spot to another? Time for reflection and charting a course for a delightful serverless developer experience. So this is interesting. I think that you could say this in some ways that the complexity is still always there. It just gets redirected into a different spot. However, what I would say is the complexity is also much more transparent, right? Um, when you have a black box server or container and you just throw stuff on it, you actually don't know about any part of your system. You can't see any part of it, right? So once you actually move to serverless, you have a bunch of these things all over the place, but you can actually see the real complexity of your application, not just this single box where you're like, this thing does all of it, right? Now you can see all of it side by side, and yeah, it's going to appear to be more complex. However, in reality, that's what your actual architecture looks like. And so for me, speaking from my own preference, I'd rather be able to see that than have it hidden away, layers underneath, right? Do I want to hide the complexity or do I want to see the complexity? And for me, I'd rather see it. So I'm sure he has a much deeper message than obviously this like small 140 character tweet. So I'd recommend everybody go look this up. The serverless illusion, yada yada. But for me, yeah, that's my opinion. And then going to Austin Collins' tweet here. For those who don't know, Austin is the CEO of Serverless Inc. And you can see that there, creator of the serverless framework, CEO. So what he says is something I was bummed to get wrong. And let me just make sure everyone can still hear me. Great. Something I was bummed to get wrong about serverless is predicting there would be more serverless services for business problems. Remember APIs for everything, and we quickly climbed the ladder to higher levels of abstraction, resulting in the greatest building blocks of all time. So, typically when we talked about serverless for a long time, and I would still argue we still do talk this way, is that they're Lego pieces, right? You stack these different pieces up on top of each other, and you create the abstractions required to be able to move your thinking to a different area, right? So if I'm constantly focused on all these underlying layers, what am I actually doing, right? Am I actually a container orchestration business, or am I making an e-commerce app? Am I making a social media app? What am I doing all this for, right? Why are we doing all this, right? We're not just like developing things to develop things, right? The example that I used when I was trying to keep thinking on this topic, and we'll talk about my tweet in a second, was let's imagine that you had to build a house, right? Who is the house for? Is it for the construction worker that's laying the concrete and pouring the concrete? Is for a customer? It's a person that's actually going to live inside that house, right? That's the end goal. So if we start with the end goal in mind and we work backwards from that, then we can ask ourselves the question: if I could snap my fingers and make a house, does the concrete laying process actually matter? Does the tooling advancements around concrete laying actually matter if now I can snap my fingers and create it, right? And I would argue the answer to that is no, it doesn't. It's a medium to being able to create a house for a customer so that they can experience that and have that feeling of happiness and use whatever that gives them to then live their most optimal life. And so all the other layers between that are just a medium to get you to that end state. And I think that's important to put in context because sometimes it never is. If you're really good at AWS SAM, great. If you're really good at CDK, great. If you're really good at Terraform, great. I'd argue as well, if you're 10 years into, 5 years into using Kubernetes and you made a gigantic migration and you've got crazy amounts of talent and you can pull them in, then great. Kubernetes is the right way to go for your company at that specific moment. However, that's a changing target, right? And it's always adapting to that. And we should never keep this single focus mindset that this one tool is going to be the salvation of everything that we do, right? So going on down, infra vendors going to infra. So they came out with tons and tons of low-level infrastructure serverless services. The architectural movement then got distracted by this stuff. Complexity grew rampant, and ultimately still haven't achieved the productivity gains promised. And this is, I think, what really caused me to make my tweet and sort of response here. Because when I think about have we actually gained the productivity gains that were promised, I have countless examples of us actually doing that using serverless. And I would say just because it's not low code, no code, or there's not an annotation that then builds everything magically in the background, it doesn't mean that the gains from a container orchestration setup to fully managed services and adopting that there wasn't significant gains in productivity. I think there is massive gains there. And we've been able to see large enterprises use these tools from serverless and use these fully managed services to get to the end goal, which is the customer value, in a faster amount of time, right? And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. So that's, I think, what ended up triggering this. But and then AI descended upon us, and I am zenith of abstraction. Pack up the playthings and go home. Anyway, if you're listening, give us AI and APIs that affect change, and the world can still be saved. So Austin is a forward thinker. He's always been on the forefront of the serverless movement. He's definitely somebody to follow and watch. And I know that they have a ton of ideas over at Serverless Inc. of how to potentially get us to that future. And it looks like maybe AI is going to play some component there and that future vision. So all right, let's go to mine, which is, again, it's not really related. It's super long. I apologize in advance. But as I said here, this is just a rant about how organizations operate, where I feel the biggest breakdowns happen, and speaking to the why behind the what. What we do is cloud development using serverless. Why we do it is customer happiness and retention, and how far the disconnect is from the why in our day-to-day as developers. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, what I've learned is serverless is usually the least of the problems that we think about at Serverless Guru, because we do it really efficiently and almost like sleepwalking. And so that's not just to like overly hype ourselves, but I'll be honest, if somebody asks me or anybody else inside of our team to build a REST API using serverless and connect it with SQS and do a bunch of other things, real-time subscriptions and on and on and on, we have infrastructures, code pieces for it. We've done it multiple different times. We've done it in production multiple different times. So, and all that stuff is repeatable, and it's very easy actually in comparison. So then we have to ask ourselves, what are the actual biggest problems that we're facing? And this is where I was talking about the disconnect between the why and the what. So the disconnect is developers oftentimes are put into silos, and the developers that have that low level context about why, like what's being built inside of the product that the customers are actually going to be able to see and interact with, they don't have a seat at the table. And I'll talk about that in a second as well. So what ends up happening is that the problem never goes away, and most companies are not great at communication. And I think this is the biggest one. They're not good at seeing blind spots, and they're not good at finding people with the right mentality in every position that surrounds development, right? So when we think about a productive, high-functioning, high-performance software development team, we're not just talking about developers that are really good at doing serverless, right? There's a bunch of other components that make up a high-functioning team. And you can put a high-functioning development team into either a culture or an organization that doesn't support that sort of high performance, and you're going to have a low performance software development team, or the overall product delivery is going to be much slower. Because, for instance, imagine that the requirements aren't well understood, right? So here I say it, if you snapped your fingers and could have something built, but without every supporting layer dialed in, it's in a vacuum, right? You've just built a highway to nowhere. And we like to say this inside the US, typically about the government, because the government loves to build highways to nowhere. And it's kind of a funny thing, because when you have a government organization, the reason why I mean, I think everyone knows what I'm saying here, but I'll say it anyways. So a government organization, they don't actually have real customers, right? So the private market actually has to do something useful to then be able to have money come in, and they have to actually build a road to somewhere. Otherwise, people won't use that road, and then they won't have the money to be recouped, and they won't have an ROI in doing so. So it would just basically be burning money. But the government doesn't work that way. They actually have the tax dollars to be able to use in whatever way they see fit. And if it doesn't actually go anywhere, it doesn't actually affect them. So that's the sort of difference. And that's why I said here, you built a highway to nowhere in the shortest possible time, right? Which is it actually useful? Is that actually a good thing? So one of our greatest allies, unrelated to serverless, that allows for the largest impact for our customers, is a never-ending wantingness to improve, not being happy with the status quo, and humility. This is so important. Humility is so important in everything that we do, to see where our own gaps exist so they can be tackled. Also, a big one, if we don't do it, then who will? If not us, who? If not now, when, right? When we see something, we tackle it, we take it seriously, we try to actually improve it. Because if everybody, it's like they say, if there's a fire and everyone sees the fire, everyone thinks that somebody's calling the police, and no one actually calls the police, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, you got to take action. You got to actually do it. Yeah, it's not your job, but hey, you know what? We all work inside the same ecosystem. And there's a benefit for everybody, including yourself, if you actually take that charge. And what I've realized in my own life is that every time that I've seen that moment where I could actually be like, you know what, maybe I can actually try to impact change here. Other people see it too, and they're very appreciative of it. At first, it might seem jarring, but that's just because you're dealing with, potentially an environment that's not used to that, right? You're dealing with an environment that's used to everyone just doing status quo thinking and never actually trying to step outside of the role that they've been given because they've been slapped down too many times. So it can be scary, but it's worth it. So also on top of that, the nuance that not every solution fits in every situation, right? So we're talking about serverless. Does serverless fit in every situation? Does seeing the complexity of your application fit in every situation? Well, here's an example. What if I was in e-commerce and I made clothing? Do I care about it being on Shopify versus being on serverless infrastructure? Do I care about it being on virtual machines or containers? Do I care about it being on a data center? No, it doesn't matter. All I'm trying to do is sell clothes, right? So if I can use a fully managed solution that's going to allow me to focus on the actual product, which is what the customer cares about, then the only things that I need are very high level checkboxes, such as performance, resiliency, and new products, right? So the site can't go down and it can't be slow, right? It needs to be usable and the customer has to have an enjoyable experience. Those are what I actually care about. That's the why of why I'm doing any of the stuff around, application development. And so for a company like that, I'd say don't use serverless and just use like Shopify. So that's where the nuance comes in. How does that play out in larger organizations? It plays out the same way. If you have a team full of people that already have Terraform experience, doing a large migration to something like AWS SAM, you just need to step back and ask yourself, why are we doing this? What is the benefits of it? Are we trying to change the language that we're using? You just really need to do the research first and really understand the benefit of it, right? But I feel like sometimes, and this is very rampant in the tech community, something pops up and then everyone tries to shift towards it. A good example of this would be, hey, some new CI/CD pipeline came out. Let's just make it GitHub actions on GitHub versus Bitbucket, right? So on Bitbucket side, all of your repositories are there. You've been building on that for years and years and years. You've got hundreds of repositories, but then this cool new feature comes out on GitHub, and then somebody who maybe is just sort of thinking at like a very narrow side, not thinking about the macro view of it, they're like, let's move everything over to GitHub, right? It sounds like a good idea it sounds like a good idea when you don't have the right people included in the conversation. If you have the right people included in the conversation, they're going to tell you very quickly that's not a good idea. But what'll end up happening is that a lot of these organizations will then start moving their repositories over to GitHub to take advantage of a feature that might be replicated on Bitbucket in a month, right? So, excuse me, now you've just switched you just wasted so much time. And you know what? Does your customer care if it's on GitHub or if it's on Bitbucket? And the answer is they don't care. So you can then look at it from a different side, which is what is the productivity gain that we're getting, or what is the stuff that we're getting as a software team by making this change? And then you also have to step back even further and say, what is actually causing the biggest delays? Is it serverless? Is it Bitbucket? Is it GitHub? Or is it management? Is it product? Is it architects? Is it lack of domain knowledge? Are people actually communicating inside the organization? And if you quantify those, I'm pretty confident that you're going to find that the difference between Terraform and SAM is like grains of sand compared to those other problems that these organizations deal with. So serverless does accomplish, in my view, something that is critical. No customers interacting with your product actually care about anything happening under the hood. I know it sucks. I'm a developer as well. But you know what? I think we have to really understand why we do what we do, right? We are doing something for the benefit of a customer that's way down the line. We may not have always the ability to see how our work actually impacts a customer. I wish more organizations actually do this. And I would encourage everybody listening to this to push for that, right? To be included in those product decisions, and not even decisions, just being a fly on the wall, being in the room, so you can have that motivation and that internal drive to know, oh, this is how the customer is going to use this later. This is what it looks like. If I was going to use the app, I would be able to see my work being played out. And I really believe that that is how you really create innovation, is you bring people into the conversation and you make them feel welcome. So Customer doesn't care what's happening on the hood, not the data center, not the virtual machines, not the containers, and oh my gosh, not even serverless. What? Not even serverless, like what are we doing, right? So they care about what they see and what impacts them. So things like listening to feedback and launching new features, performance, resiliency, et cetera. So what does that mean in terms of servers, containers, virtual machines, et cetera? Well, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I know it's repeated it through the industry as well, and also the illusion of serverless exists as well. So you get all spectrums. Serverless is the most optimal medium to bring that focus and energy to the customer needs of your actual product, because you're not a container orchestration business, you're not a server configuration business. You shouldn't be setting up racks of servers and spending time on that if you're an e-commerce app. It's a waste of time. And time is precious. And anything that we end up owning, every line of code that we own or we write, we now own the maintenance of it and the overhead of that all the way into the future, right? So every single update to the dependencies underneath it, testing of it, integrations of it, all that stuff adds additional layers. And then guess what? The person that wrote that thing, they then leave 2 years later. So what do I want when I'm thinking about infrastructure? I want self-documenting infrastructure. What does that mean, self-documenting infrastructure? Well, a self-documenting infrastructure is exactly what we have with infrastructure as code. It's a recipe. It says exactly what's going to happen. It's going to say exactly what it takes to actually build this architecture out. And even if that person that made it leaves, there's a shared common language that we all have. Okay, well, what about these new annotation platforms and no code and low code? Okay, well, what happens when they sell to a company and then they shut down the platform? Right? I feel like I get kind of exhausted sometimes because it's like if you think on a multi-year spectrum, right? And not just thinking about like the day-to-day, not all companies are going to exist and not all products that we use are going to exist. And so we really need to we have to take a step back and say, if we have the ability to own something, let's own something that's repeatable, fully managed, and that scales really well and lowers our long-term effort, right? So does that mean that if I can press a button and have this black box do everything that I want, is that good? Yes, in some ways it is. If I'm trying to deliver a new thing out to a customer to understand the customer demand for it, sure, click the button, right? But if you already know the customer demand and you're trying to harden and make sure that long-term, you're going to be able to make those minor improvements and optimizations and do so in a way that we were talking about earlier, self-documenting, then you're probably going to go for something that's a infrastructure as code sort of level. And I'd argue serverless is the optimal choice for that compared to the other options currently, because there's a line, right? You can go so far before you actually trip over a line into like a black box kind of scenario. And I feel like too often what we should be doing, and I've heard other people in the space talk about this, is 80% research and 20% implementation, right? But usually what happens is 5% research and 95% implementation, and then rework happens, and then we throw all this stuff away. It doesn't end up doing what we should have found out very early on. We wasted tons of money, we wasted tons of time, and and then we should be self-aware and accountable, right? We did that, right? No one else did that to us. The product wasn't flawed. A product that's a no-code solution is not inherently flawed. A no-code solution can be the right fit in the right scenario. However, if you use it in the wrong scenario, it's not the no-code platform's fault, it's your fault. That's my opinion. So that is done best, in my opinion, with serverless, even its current state versus other options. There are problems. There are a lot of layers that you see when you work with serverless. This is true. Teams can really go the wrong direction, right? There are some things where serverless does allow for automatic guardrails, right? And that is helpful. But there is ways to provision and configure things poorly. I'll give you one example of that. If you configure a Lambda function with the wrong memory and you overdo it, you can end up seeing huge amounts of cost increase and almost no performance increase, right? So that's a good example of you're trying to increase the memory of the Lambda function to make it go faster to increase your performance. But actually, because of serverless, you end up actually causing no performance increase and a 200% increase in cost, right? So should that be done automatically under the hood? I think so, 100%. I think that there should be much more tooling. Who should provide that? In my opinion, AWS should. They should be the one that's helping update that stuff and give us better under the hood tooling. One example of this was the Spectre meltdown. So if y'all are familiar with Spectre meltdown and the Linux kernel system, there was an exploit that happened, and on all of the servers that were running Linux, they were now exploitable, right? It was like a 0-day hack that happened. And I was on a technical operations team inside of a healthcare company. And at the time, I had already been working with serverless for like a couple of years. And then I was brought in to help patch servers. Bad project. I was, I changed soon after this or whatever. I won't get into the details of why I was in this technical operations team. But I got to see just how crazy it is, right? AWS doesn't want to get inside of your server and try to update anything because it might break. And then you know what? Then they're liable, right? The same day that the exploit was understood, I believe it was the following day. It might have been the same day. They updated the entire Lambda compute across all Lambda globally for you under the hood. I was on a technical operations team. Spectre and Meltdown had happened 6+ months ago, and we were still trying to figure out what to do with this because no one knew who created these servers. It was all black boxes, and somebody had to go in there and actually update the kernel, and then we had to make sure that it actually worked. But we didn't have documents to say if it actually was there. If we do this to this server, what is it actually linked to? And no one had that information. I was an outside consultant, so we were basically just scrambling, chickens with our head cut off, trying to figure out a problem that was super complex, but also dead simple, right? And so what is the power of serverless long term? Well, there you go. The next exploit's going to happen, and when it does, under the hood, it's going to patch everything. And you know what? The people that were working with serverless, they just carried on with their day like nothing happened, right? Everybody else was in a similar boat that I was in. And if you don't already have those advanced patching methods worked out, and you don't already have that map of how those servers and containers actually fit together, what a nightmare. So yeah, so getting back to the serverless side, I've seen the adoption of serverless at large enterprises slowly transform the entire organization. I know this sounds like one of those like talking points that everybody says that would be on my end, but I've seen how people view problems, how they hire, what they care about change. So what problems they view, right? Well, once you start solving the idea of the underlying layers of complexity with running your own compute, now you start thinking about, okay, well, how do we go a little bit faster? And what if we want to do something with a database? Well, we have to manage all the connection pooling here. Well, what if we implemented something there too? And it starts making you think about everything in a completely different way. And I think that's a very beautiful thing that serverless brings with it, and something that I've seen personally for the 5+ years of serverless guru. How they hire, right? It's an interesting thing when you start trying to solve these problems and you keep working yourself up the stack. The people that you actually need are people that think in that way, and it's a different way of thinking. And so you have to change how you hire for people, and you also then have to change the people that are above the people that you're hiring and that are working with serverless. They also have to change, right? And I'm not saying that you need to throw away your entire team, but they have to adopt the way that their mindset has been, right? Because when we're narrowly focused on one thing and we start doing and making change in multiple different areas, you can't then have people that are above those people only narrowly focused on one thing, right? A good example of this that all of us are aware of with things like application development is when we have people that are just measuring the lines of code written, right? And they're using that as a KPI. Come on, right? We're going to use the KPI of code written as a measurement of a good developer or a bad developer. Every code that we write, we own, and we own the overhead and the maintenance of it forever, right? If you reduce the amount of code, you're actually saving the company so much time and efficiency long term. So it's like if you have the wrong mindset from the beginning, you end up you play that out actually. And that's what I've seen happen. They change what they care about, they change what they think about. And I think that's a real result of actual results over multiple years driven by service. Teams feel empowered. I've seen it happen. When you start, I was on that technical operations team and I saw the beeper duty, right? I know probably a lot of y'all are either in it or have been in it where you're constantly on call, et cetera. But once the system that you built just runs and it just works, right? And you didn't build all these like queue systems yourself and hand roll it, and it's all like it goes down every couple of days, and one developer on the team is the only person that has the information, and so we're all relying on that person, and it's just how much chaos, right? When you take that away, the team is like, all right, great. Let me do some stuff that actually is fun and is actually going to make an impact in a different way. And people start getting excited about going to work and on building things because they're not doing all that mundane stuff that doesn't actually challenge them and push them to grow. They're actually at that edge now, that frontier of their understanding. And that is where all innovation comes from, in my opinion. Spending less time on junk, that's pretty much what I was saying. And tools for faster and more consistent delivery, right? So sometimes you hand roll those tools internally. And then we've even seen companies hand roll those tools, and then it ends up becoming an entire new product for them, right? So this move to adopt serverless was just to help in this one area for, let's say, scalability or understanding, just not owning the lower layer of compute. And all of a sudden, by doing so, they now have seen a gap in terms of the entire market for managing some piece of their own development, right? And so what I'm talking about here is it's been done with CDK. They've built the layers on top of CDK, and it's like simpler abstractions. But prior to that, you had companies that had developers that needed to write, let's say, Lambda functions or REST APIs, and they were actually building their own infrastructure as code, simplified input to create that infrastructure as code for the team, right? So simple input then creates that. What does that mean? Well, now you've just created an automation engine, and that can end up accelerating every other developer inside of your organization. And it's a pretty incredible thing that a company that was focused on sunsetting servers is also at the same time on the other end building an automation engine for new service development, and that's the beauty there. So let's go through it one by one until each layer is more optimized. So you just keep moving up that stack, and not speaking purely about cloud development, because when you dial that in, you have the right team. They want to tackle all the other issues too, and that's really critical. Another big one here is when you are working on that latest edge, and when people do feel empowered and they do feel challenged at work, you end up attracting more people that want to have an environment like that. And now you start collecting a lot of talent. And that talent is actually that accumulation of talent, and listening to them and bringing them into the conversation. They're going to be the ones that actually help open the door to everything else. And so getting more even unrelated, too many people are running VM and container orchestration businesses. No, you're not. That's not what you actually do. We talked about that already. All of us should see the light at the end of the tunnel and know, I spelled that wrong, know why we do what we do. But silos exist, human problems and politics exist, and the ones that can influence real change usually don't have a seat at the table. So if you're listening to this and you feel that you saw something happen with the product, you saw a direction that didn't go the right way, and you saw it earlier, hey, next time you see that, well, I know you gotta like sort of step out, put yourself in the light a little bit, but at the same time, that could end up creating a whole, like, so many positive ripple effects that's worth it. And if you do that and they react badly to that, I don't know if that's the best environment to be in, right? So in some ways, it could even be a positive, right? So I'll kind of skip through this. This was just about you know what, I'll talk about it. So I worked in a fast food restaurant, I don't know how long ago, 10 years ago or something. And I think let's just talk to this. So focusing entirely on cleaning the kitchen while the dining room is filthy. How does the customer see it? Does the customer see it as clean, right? So if I'm in the dining room and it looks perfectly spotless, can I actually see the filth behind the scenes? Well, no, I can't. But a lot of times customers actually do know something is off, right? They can't put their finger on it because they can't see it, but something just doesn't seem right, right? Maybe the food tastes like it was from a microwave, right? If y'all are familiar with Gordon Ramsay, he's got Chef Mike. If you look up Chef Mike, it's kind of interesting. So for my opinion, serverless allows for a cleaner kitchen, and actually a cleaner kitchen than the dining room, right? So most people think about the dining room. A lot of people don't think about the kitchen, and the kitchen is gross, right? I remember cleaning grease behind a fryer. It's disgusting. It gives me nightmares. But when the kitchen becomes cleaner than the dining room, well, guess what? The dining room has to change as well, and so do the waiters, and so do the processes supporting the flow of food, and so does the customer care and service to take feedback and actually iterate on it. So it's a North Star. This doesn't always happen. Obviously, even in the case where I'm speaking about from my own personal experience of seeing these changes take place, it's not completely solved. There's still a lot of room to go, but that's exciting, right? When I can see that change starting to happen, that gets me even more excited about what can happen. So um, this is important though. What can we control versus can't control? What we can control is never see a problem and walk past it. Never think it's not your job. Always try to improve in every aspect of yourself. Try to bring the best out of people, make them feel welcome and happy, because that's where innovation blossoms. Push back when it doesn't make sense, or there may be a better way, because you don't work for your boss. You work for the company that the boss works for. That money is not theirs. And I feel like, as I said here, this concept is not really talked about as much. A lot of times we just are so conditioned to accept the environment that we're inside of. But you know what? The boss that's capping innovation, the boss that's making you do stuff that doesn't make sense, they're actually wasting customer funds. Not customer funds. They're wasting the company funds, right? And you don't work for Joe, who is your boss. You work for the company, and Joe worked for the company. And so the company should be doing the most optimal path for the company's benefit and for customer satisfaction. And it's a hard thing to be able to fight against. I know this is like basically walking towards a tsunami if you're by yourself, but it's I'm really excited about this area, and I think it's a North Star for Serverless Guru, and we want to continue to basically push back in this way. And we're becoming a stronger organization, and as such, we're getting more evidence to be able to have these conversations with executives, and it gets me really excited, because I think that's, out of everything we've talked about, I feel like that is where you're going to see the biggest amount of operational improvements and efficiency gains. So I get a little dramatic here. I think you can tell by me talking here. I know everybody inside of Serverless Group probably knows this already. I'm gonna be a pretty dramatic person. So if you have someone using company funds in a less optimal way than they could be, what would you call that other than wasting money? Would you call it fraud? Or it's not called fraud because they don't know better? That's the super dramatic part, right? But in some ways, I do get upset for any situation that I hear about where somebody is capping somebody and not letting them and not listening to them when they actually might have a valid point, or when the person that is supposed to be the boss is actually doing things in an unoptimal way because they need to have the control. They need to feel like they're the boss that's implementing, right? But the reality is lost time, lost potential, lost innovation, lost customers, being beat out in the market, not being able to compete against your competitors, and a sad team that, on and on and on. Dramatic, as I said. So I know that sometimes the box is all we know. So this box that we're working inside of is all that we know. And so we try to fix the problems inside the box. And some improvements to the box problems, they have a small impact. Sometimes they have a large impact. But I really, personally speaking, I want to go much further than that box, right? I think that everybody that's a software developer, a programmer, I feel like we have a very unique mindset, and that mindset plays out extremely well in every other role of business, from product all the way up to executive roles, to sales, to marketing, to all of it. Because you know what? We're problem solvers, and all we do all day is solve problems that for the first time we're experiencing. We're really good at researching. We're really good at understanding the best way to do something. A lot of times we're extremely humble because we get humbled every single day. Because if we know how to do something, we just hand it to you. If we don't know, that's pretty much our whole job, right? Is working on the unknown parts. And I feel like for the marketing side and the sales side and all these other areas that make a business actually operate and run, what you have is people that have past experience that they lean on, and they don't actually update that because they don't have to. And we have to every single day. So if you take somebody like that, that's interested in sales or marketing, and you help them, I think they're going to be the best marketer in the world. I think they'll be the best salesperson in the world. And I really believe that very strongly. So also, I feel like what serverless does as well is it opens the door for more change. What I would also say is that serverless, the mindset that's required to do it, is you're basically saying, what do I actually care about? Do I care about all these underlying layers of compute, or do I care about actually getting something out to a customer that they're going to be able to touch and interact with? And I feel like as serverless developers, we are constantly focused on that. And so that mindset is actually extremely important and valuable. And I think maybe even out of everything that's come from serverless, just that one piece is going to change everything in the software industry. It's still early, but I completely believe that. So it starts as a technology enhancement, and it soon starts to cast a light on all other areas, simply because the thinking goes, okay, now how do we go even faster? How do we create a customer experience that's even better, right? And I talked about this in another coffee with Ryan. It's a TED talk that you can look up. It's called Unreasonable Hospitality. And I really love this idea of unreasonable hospitality, because it means that when you see something or somebody says something, or you just see the way, you know what, every single day they've got the same coffee cup, and it, you know what I mean? And you just get them a coffee cup holder thing. They didn't ask you for that. That's just seeing something and doing something for this other person that's not transactional. And I very strongly believe that if you do good in the world, good will come back to you. It just takes a little bit of time. And yeah, with that, let's stop the, let's infight, let's not infight. I don't know. You guys tell me, but I think that we're all aligned, at least in one central way, which is around what serverless actually allows us to do, and the method at which we do that is changes every day. It's going to continue to change, but I feel like we all are still aligned in that. So that's a really long rant. Thank you for listening to me talk through that. And let's look at some questions. Comments. All right. First off, hey Almir, what is going on, man? I saw Almir recently in Milan. I love Almir. Always the most positive guy in the room, and you can't beat that. Also, we've got Benoit here. If you don't know Benoit, he is the maintainer of the AppSync serverless framework plugin, also creator of GraphBolt, which allows you to test AppSync APIs. And so also at Serverless Guru alongside Almir. And yeah, definitely worth a follow on Twitter and all that if you can find Benoit Barry there. All right, moving on down. We got Tyler here. Good morning. Good morning, sir. Let's see, engineering by heart. Hello, Ryan, Edo, and Malaga. Yeah, hello, how's it going? Let's see. Okay, we got Craig Mont, Rufus. Hi, what kind of coffee are you drinking today? It's a great question. This is Coffee with Ryan, and I have not drank any coffee yet. This is my Americano here. I'm inside of the Cereal Coffee Shop, which I just gave my live location to. So, hey, if you're trying to kidnap me, now's the time, hopefully not, don't do that. All right. I don't know what y'all are drinking, but I know from the last one, Tyler was drinking a mushroom coffee. So there you go. Okay, stale LaCroix on my desk, so I can drink that. There you go. The SG Manifesto. Yes, that sounds very intense. So, it sounds super intense, dramatic. We like the drama here. Paul is also at Serverless Guru, new host of the Talking Serverless podcast, and also if you meet him in person, one of the biggest personalities you'll ever meet. And I've been able to see this play out many times. The story that I love the most is that last reInvent, where Paul basically hustled himself into a free skateboard that was like handmade, and it was like custom, and it was probably $600 or something. And he just kept sort of like saying like, hey, I know that you're doing this competition. If you don't end up giving away, can I have it? And he ended up, finessing himself a really awesome skateboard. And then we got to skate on it a little bit at the event, which is also a fun part of Serverless Guru that I don't think you see at other booths, is us trying to do ollies on the floor of AWS reInvent, which, if AWS is watching, yes, we won't do that again. No one calls the police as the bystander effect. Yeah, everyone thinks that, somebody's going to call. I've done it before. But you should take that action. Yeah. And you also have the shiny toy syndrome. Completely agree. Oh, well, now everybody's adopting, I don't know what you call it, serial script, right? Because I've got serial behind me, Fruit Loop script, right? So it's like now that everyone's doing serial script, we got to adopt that immediately. Otherwise, we're going to fall behind. And you're never actually, I don't think like somebody has to step back and ask, like, what are we doing? You know, what are we actually going to get out of this? There we go. Here's Alan Helton. No, there's a thing from Alan Helton. Oh, there it is. Low-key background music to bring Ryan's talk home. Hey, there you go. There is actually music, but I'm using an AI thing called Crisp to like help with the background noise. So if my mic sounds like I'm both on another planet as well, that's the reason why. And acoustic, cinematic, daydreaming, lo-fi. Hey, Andres, duck feeding music. Bienvenidos, amigo. Estoy aprendiendo español. Estoy aquí en España. Y that's all I'll say in Spanish for now. Okay. Duck feeding music. That's funny. Okay. This line hits hard. Not trying to improve the environment / tech is also losing a chance to save or to go to a larger margin. Yeah, totally, Joao. And welcome to, hey, Joao. I know you've been here the whole time because this is a few minutes ago. Good to see you. Joao is also on our team. One thing that I love about Joao is when I first met him, and I'm probably saying your name wrong slightly, but I'm trying my best, you know. Portuguese is on the list, but it comes after Spanish, unfortunately. So I'm gonna be behind on this for a while. But when I first met Joao at AWS Summit Sao Paulo, he wasn't actually involved with Serverless Guru yet, but that didn't stop him from taking on people that were walking up to our booth and telling them about Serverless Guru. And that really touched my heart, man. And I really made a note of that. So I just want to say, thank you for that. It was really cool of you to help us when we were swarmed by like 30, 40 people the whole time. And, I was sitting there like, I don't know how to speak Portuguese. And, you came in and you kind of saved the day. All right, let's see. Favorite type of bread. Cash money. No, I was kidding. Dollar bills, No, my favorite type of bread is my girlfriend is making a baguette, and so anything that she makes is awesome, and it's homemade. I've never had homemade bread before, and it's pretty great. So shout out to homemade bread. Let's see. Yeah, all the stream snipers are coming for you. Yeah, please don't call an FBI raid or what the equivalent would be here in Spain on me inside of the coffee shop. That's, we don't need that. I went to a Barcelona game while I was here. It was Barcelona versus Paris. And this was my absolute, if you guys haven't been to a European football match, and I'll say football, even though everything in my bones want to say soccer, but I'll say football. It was Barcelona versus Paris, and it was inside of Barcelona. And I've always loved Barcelona because of Messi and the history there. I'm there and they lose 1-4, so it's not the greatest, outcome, but the experience of having people right behind my head that were ready at all times to fight anybody that would have even looked at them wrong is quite the experience. So they actually had the Paris fans behind a this huge plexiglass. And when Paris scored, they were like banging on it like a hockey game. And it was just like, and they were chanting and they took their shirts off and they were like jumping. And it was just like, oh man. So at the end of this game, actually, when I was leaving, I saw something interesting take place. Everybody's rushing out. You're trying to get to the subway. You're trying to get away from the stadium. I only saw people going up I saw people going up the hill. You asked the question. The game just got out. Why are they going up the hill? Maybe they're going to see the players when they get into the buses, right? But they weren't little kids, right? So maybe there's adults that need to see the players, right? And I get that too, 100%. But what it looked like was Barcelona young men between, the ages of 18 and 35 going up the hill, likely to get into confrontation with the Paris fans. That's my real solid feeling of seeing that. And every single time I just tried to avoid eye contact because you know what? Football is intense, and if you beat Barcelona and knock them out of the UEFA Championship, and it's done by Paris, and the way that happened with a red card on the field and stuff, tensions were high. Tensions were very high. Yeah, absolutely. Giving the best for the gurus, 100%. Well, yeah. I think with that, we're kind of coming to a close. I know there was probably countless things that we could talk about, but you know what? That's why we'll have more coffees with Ryan. So um, I really love this format. I really appreciate everybody coming and listening to me talk. I don't take it for granted. I'm extremely grateful to have a voice and have a platform and have a group of people around me at Serverless Guru that are so supportive, and a community that is so focused on just trying to do their best work every single day. And I think that's ultimately that's the only thing that we can control, right? So yeah, here we go. So from Serverless Guru here, for all the viewers, what sport should Ryan go watch when he visits your country? Great question. Great question. I've never seen a European football match where the team that I wanted to win actually won. So that's still on my list, actually. I've never seen cricket or rugby or I don't know what is it called when they throw the thing on the ice and they have that sweeper and they're sweeping at it, and it's like sort of like, I don't know if y'all know what that's called, but I think that would be super intense. It's like basically like shuffleboard but on ice, and with something that's like a huge rock or something. So anyways, it's called curling. Yes, curling. And also, right, where they throw it like that too. I think I could make it. I think that I could do it. Yeah, curling. There you go. Oh, hey, Marcelo. Marcelo is from the Brazilian team out there in Santos. I believe I'm right with that. Santos. Also lived in Florianopolis. I'm giving all your info out. Social security number is 555-5555. And Marcelo's a really great guy. So if you ever have a chance of interacting with Marcelo, if you play any instruments, I don't know if you can do a virtual band. I don't know how the real-time connection works with that, but Marcelo plays guitar, does like everything imaginable with music, and also is one of the top racers for is it Formula One? The game for Formula One? Yeah, top F1. Yeah, so if you're looking for a challenge, if you're looking to get smoked, maybe you're looking to take the crown, Marcel is your guy. They say to run with people that are faster than you, right, to improve. So if you're looking to, become a top F1 racer, then, definitely, iRacing, there it is, iRacing. So, all right, well, I want to say again, thank you guys. We'll close out a little bit sooner here. I hope you all have a wonderful Friday, April 19th, and a great weekend. And I hope that everybody gets to see their family, friends, touch some grass, build some cool new stuff, try some new software languages. And I'll see you in the next one. All right. Cheers, guys. Cheers. Bye.